are here for a panel called How Do You Make VR for Everyone? I hope that's why you're here. I'm Doug Northcook. I'm a professor of immersive media at Chatham University in Pittsburgh, where we are starting a four-year undergraduate program specifically focused on immersive technology. And I also do various other things. And with me today are the best people that I know. I'll let them introduce themselves.
My name is Robin Hunneke. I'm on the advisory board for VRDC. Please fill out your forms after you see the session. It's a great way to give feedback, and please silence your cell phone. And if you're going to ask questions, use the mic so that we get it on the record. I have to say those things because that's for GDC. I'm a professor and also CEO and game designer. I run a program at UC Santa Cruz, which is an undergraduate Bachelor of the Arts in Games and Playable Media, and also a master's program there, which is in digital arts and new media, both of which help lots of people from all walks of life get access to emerging technologies and make games for them. And then I also am the CEO of Phenomena, which is local here in San Francisco. We're 30 people, and we make weird games like Watam, which is coming out on the PlayStation this summer, and Luna, which is also coming out on the PlayStation in PSVR and will be at PAX. So that's what I've been doing lately. I'm really glad to see all of you here. Thanks for coming.
Hi, new friends. Oh, hello. I'm Sai. I'm previously the studio director of Alchemy Labs. We did Job Simulator and Rick and Morty, and I have left to start a super secret stealth new project. And that's basically where I'm at right now.
Yes.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kat Harris. I previously on where Kat Harris was at Microsoft doing awesome R&D design and development for now I can say like, ooh, HoloLens 2 is out, yay! and cool like Azure Spatial Anchors. You should check it out because they're freaking awesome. But now currently I am a designer and prototyper at a company called Magnopus, who did Coco VR and Blade Runner VR game, and also does cool VR production stuff. So that is where I am currently at. Yay.
Okay, great. So today's panel comes out of a very special event that I was honored to host back in the fall, which is called The Convening, which is an event that Falling Water, which is pictured here, which is an iconic Frank Lloyd Wright designed house outside of Pittsburgh, where I live. And the curators at Falling Water and their directors were gracious enough to offer me The Convening for 2018, which is a funded event to work on a difficult design problem. And I was like, I've got a lot of those. So I invited a group of designers, developers, people working in VR specifically to ask the question that is this panel, which is, how do we make VR something that is for everybody? Yeah. And that weekend was really great. It was really productive, and we've seen a lot of really interesting movement come out of those conversations and go back into the companies that were a part of that. And so we wanted to come and share some of those conversations. And for us, this is also a chance to continue some of those conversations with each other. And the thing that I'm maybe the most excited about is that right after that, Robin came back out to Falling Water, and we worked with an amazing zine artist in Chicago named Gage Linston. And Falling Water funded the creation of a zine that we actually have the first print run here today for all of you to take home with you. Hopefully we have enough. If we run out, just follow me on Twitter and I'll make sure that a copy gets to you digitally or otherwise. And the zine is an imagining of the future in the year 2050, where students from all over the world go to high school together in VR. And it is an attempt to imagine a bright future where we are more global and more connected and more fun. And it's really weird. And it will be in the museum store at Falling Water, which is a laugh for me. So when we got up to the convening, where there's no internet and no cell phone service, we spent our part of our initial time going up to the studio space that's there, taking a piece of butcher paper, wrapping the entire studio in it, and listing all of our problems. And I'll tell you,
There were many.
this is one section of one part of one wall with a list of problems, ranging from problems with content, problem with the ability of creators to share meaningful work, the inability of creators to work on broader use cases, social problems, ethical problems, people getting sick the first time they try VR and then never doing it again. I mean, it was hours and hours of just listing problems.
But it felt so good.
It felt so good. It was a really great moment of catharsis.
We needed to purge.
Yeah.
We needed to
Yeah.
purge and just put that out there so we could like touch it. Like,
Yeah.
Like, oh, these are the problems.
It was also great to just see them because then you're like, oh, now we can like tackle them now that they're all out there.
Or
Yeah.
just,
Yeah,
drink.
yeah.
Punch them.
And so after just vomiting all of these problems onto the wall, we spent part of the next day kind of sifting through those problems and identifying for us what were the themes that we were seeing and what were the things that all of our companies and institutions have identified as the most meaningful areas to move this forward, which is not just how do we get more users into VR, but how do we get more kinds of users into VR. And so we're going to talk through a few of those pieces today and talk through some of the things that we're working on and some of the things that we're seeing and also some of the things that we are hoping that you all will work on because there's only 4 of us and there's a lot of you. So, and so the first thing that we worked on up there was talking about accessibility for users. And that was a really broad-reaching conversation going from access for people with a wider range of abilities, access related to economics and finance. And so we're going to kind of start there and give each of us an opportunity to kind of talk about what we took away from that part of the conversation and ask each other some questions.
Yeah, and I was going to say that I think that one of the best things about the convening was that it was people from all walks of the creative and sort of implementation pipeline of VR and AR and mixed reality. So we had people there that work on tools. We had people there that work on software. We had people that were working on the hardware and then demo content for this new stuff that's coming out. But also people who are thinking more and more about the harder, longer-term problems of living in a society where this is a reality, where it's not like, what if there's a market or what if there's adoption, but just like 5 years from now or 10 years from now, when it's a reality, what is our experience going to be? And I think that Kat was really good at talking about accessibility issues from the perspective of trying to build like a second-gen headset, you know? And so I was just curious to hear some of your thoughts about that stuff.
Yeah. So again, I came from the Microsoft side. So tools, from hardware, from trying, especially nowadays, Microsoft is very open source and trying to create this open foundation for a lot of different types of realities to be developed for. And so a lot of the accessibility is, okay, everyone, especially with new facial tracking and new sensors, we're all trying to rebuild our own systems from the ground up, and there isn't a lot of sharing, which is the exact opposite of accessibility and being able to get new people into the space. And so a lot of what I have seen in the past and what a lot of developers now are learning is that if we do have these walled gardens, all of a sudden we have fragmentation everywhere.
Yeah.
And the whole point of open source is to, okay, we have these protocols now where we have a design foundation where, okay, if I'm holding an object in VR, now if Sai wants to grab that object from me, like, and she has a different headset or a different set of controllers, what does that look like? How do we have that foundation of at least ideas of how that will work? And for our phones, we all know that pinching means zoom. Like, that is in any phone, in any sort of tablet, we know that that's the functionality that is expected. But we don't have any of that for VR because like no one's talking about it, or some people are talking about it, but we still haven't explored enough, and it's still so new. Yeah. And we can't have these divides in our foundation for different hardwares if we expect that whole like generation of adoption to be like, hey, everyone is using this now. How do we get to that next step?
Mm-hmm.
And
And
so
I think also just in terms of working together as a group, one of the things that has come up in a lot of these conversations is the fact that while there are these little pockets of funding and there are little ways in which you can engage with a particular hardware and that creators group inside that hardware and stuff like that, we're a really small community. Like you could probably reach out and poke someone in the audience who's either working on something that's similar to what you're doing or is interested in a problem that you have.
Yep.
And our ability to spend the weekend together talking about these problems, it made it very clear to us that accessibility is a lot about how much we share in terms of our design language and our problems. And like that idea of just putting the problems out there, like this is not the first time people have made VR,
Right.
like
Yeah.
I see you, Brenda. Like, I mean, these are not new questions, but it's significant that at every turn, the way that the system is designed to have us make innovative capitalistic decisions that like make someone rich means that the actual research part of it is, it's not as open. And so I think one of the things that we talked about a lot of this beginning of the convening was just like, let's talk to each other more and like, let's be honest when we're not really solving the problem. Like pretending that you're solving the problem is kind of shitty for everyone.
And it also, it just reminded me, it also reminded all of us that like, which problems are actually problems and which ones that we think are problems but aren't actually like important to solve yet, and just laying it all out and talking to all the different people. It was like, oh, I'm working on this. And it's like, oh, why are you working on that? Like, why do you think this is a problem? And why should we tackle that one first? Because like you saw the butcher paper, again, it went all the way around the room. Some problems are very much dependent on other problems. So it's like you have to figure out which ones we wanted to tackle first.
Yeah, and in which order you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and a big part of that, the conversation about accessibility went not just to making content and making tools more accessible to developers, but also making content more accessible to a wider range of users, which I know is something, Sai, that you've done many talks
A
on.
lot. That's kind of my jam.
So I wonder if you can just speak to that part of the conversation.
Yeah,
a little bit.
I think about that a lot in terms of like what's the widest. Like the VR is for everyone. Like that is a deeply feeling thing in me. I deeply believe that VR is the most human technology we have. Period. So you have to make it for as many humans as possible, and really expand that definition of what human is, which is not just me and what I would like to see and what I want to make. So like a lot of what we did, like especially with Alchemy Labs content, is again try and make it for a wide range of human beings. And this was both in terms of interest, age, and also like ability level. So for example, a lot of the things that we did is we thought about like in Rick and Morty, we thought a lot about making everything one-handed interactions, because we had failed with that. There was one interaction in Job Simulator that required two hands. It was just one. And if we'd know, that's bad.
I mean, but like the fact that you knew that it was just one and that like, oh, we fixed it next time.
Yeah,
did
and
it
we
again
worked
and
on
we
that.
fixed it.
And that was another thing. Like, a lot of the games that I like to make are the games that like, are very, I like to move around a lot, right? Like I like to bend down and pick out and navigate with a space and walk around a space. But we also had to make it, a smaller space so you could have standing room only or sitting room only. We put in Rick and Morty, which is we took a lot of lessons from Job Simulator and then went to Rick and Morty. We did something where if something was on the ground, we actually had it hover a little bit so you didn't have to bend over to pick it up as much, because we found some users who had like some mobility issues, like back issues, whatever. It just sort of helped them. And so that was something that was really important for us to do in terms of our game content. In addition to that, like the actual game itself was made for as many humans beings as possible. We didn't want you to have to be, say, a gamer to come in and play this. Like VR is for everyone. I want to be able to give it to a tiny child, although I would never do that because VR is for people who are over the age of 13 only. But we're a child to play it.
Yeah. We're a 5-year-old
This
to
comes up
grab
all
the
the time,
headset.
right? Like if VR is an experiential sale, right? You don't get into VR because you thought it would be cool and then you're going to dump a bunch of money on a VR headset and a computer to run it or whatever. It's the thing that you go and you try it and you experience it. And we all know this. It's something that we don't talk about a lot in the community, but kids just get it.
They just
like you put
get
the
it.
headset on the kid, they're immediately there. They're doing what
yeah.
they don't care about looking stupid. Yeah. And it's the same as with the Wii, like you would give the Wii controller to someone and tell them to throw a ball in blue box and they would just go, like embarrassing, but like our best audience is coming up now, right?
yeah.
They're technically not supposed to be in the headset because I don't know, eyes grow or something.
Or something, yeah, something.
Well, and
Whatever.
I just published this article with the Oculus developer blog about universal design, which is an architectural principle that basically says that if you design something for everyone, you're designing something for yourself, because at some point you will be someone else.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that a lot of developers and designers really miss, is that they design for themselves in a specific moment.
This is a temporary situation.
Yeah.
Like many things are
Yeah.
going to change over the years. I get very rowdy. I hurt myself. You know, my abilities
Yeah.
change
Yeah,
rapidly. And then there's the long term.
yeah.
how
I
our
can
bodies-
guarantee at some point I will be, my vision will change, and my
Yep.
hearing will change, and
Yep.
my ability to play super hot and bend like all the way backwards into like balancing half moon will change. I hope not, but
I believe in you.
yeah, but I think it's a really easy thing to miss, and I think a lot of people think about designing for they're like, oh well, that's not my user, and it's like, well, it will be at some point. At some point, your users will change, your users will age, and we're trying to think about developing a platform and experiences that have longevity and that are adaptable. And a perfect example, one of my colleagues came to my office last week, and he is in his late 50s and he loves VR. He has a Rift at his house. His kids think he's a weirdo. And I was like, well, have you tried Beat Saber? And he was like, no. He's like, I had shoulder surgery last year, so I can't raise my left arm above here, so I didn't get it. And I was like, well, there's actually a
one-handed.
one-handed mode
Yep.
So
that
much
you
harder,
can totally
though.
play. And he went and got it, and then he played it, and he was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. Thank you so much. And I was like, don't thank me, thank
the
Yaroslav
developer.
and Jan.
Yeah.
But I think Beat Saber specifically is a great example of you can play one-handed. They just released a video where they're working with Subpack to make a deaf mode for Beat Saber where you play with a haptic vest. And that kind of thinking, where that's not just a really great experience for the deaf community and for deaf gamers, but that's also a really great experience for people who have full range of hearing to be able to have
Fully
haptic
immersive,
feedback when
yeah.
they're playing.
Yeah.
So it's about, creating the broadest range of experiences and adaptability.
Yeah.
So.
And when we started making newer technologies that are now no longer considered new, like your phone or even the game console or the internet, even television, when we made these media a while back, we were not that aware of the implicit bias in our design patterns and in the ways that we think about people as a community of developers and designers back then. And this is the first time that we as a community have an opportunity to design for everybody in a way that really is awake and really is aware of the fact that as it becomes more accessible to use a device to see the world differently, whether you're holding it or wearing it, and that the cost of goods goes down, the explosion in use cases and like what someone's environment is huge, right? And it's really important to think about it now and to sort of to think about the bias that you have. Just even like it will be a living room with a couch in it is a bias,
that is a bias.
right? Like some people don't sit on couches. Some people don't have that kind of furniture in their living space. Some people have sleeping mats that they roll up and then they sit on floors on the chair or chairs on the floor that are actually more like a mat. Like there's very different ways of living that if you consider these things ahead of time and you get at your unconscious bias now before the explosion of adoption actually happens, you're in a much better place to build stuff that's human.
Well, and this goes into making content too. Not everyone interacts with the world in the exact same way. People have different expectations of how the world should work.
Yeah.
I use an example a lot about making tea, right? I make tea the correct way, which is I heat up
Microwave.
water. No, wrong. That is literally, you're a monster. How could you?
This morning.
But this is the thing, right? There are so many ways to make tea. Like a civilized human, I put my tea bag in a cup and then make my water in a kettle. And then I pour the water over the tea, and then I put the milk in after it steeps for 4.5 minutes. But the thing is that there are other people who put their tea bag in the kettle when they're like on the stove? Yeah, I know, monstrous.
Or
Monstrous.
the
Some people
microwave.
put their milk in first and put the tea bag in the milk, turning it into some trash fluid, and then pour the hot water over it. Like, but the thing is that like the thing is that these are the expectations people have, right? They have expectations with their world, and when you're making content, you have to understand the myriad of human beings who are going to interact with it, because then it stops being a world, then it starts becoming kind of like a tech or a game, right? Like it's not, you lose that magic. So I'm an aggressive demoer. Like I do demos at every conference, and not just gaming conferences. I actually go to like museums, like I did Tribeca once. Like, you know, I try and go places where not necessarily all gamers, because I want the people who don't have a ready understanding of like controllers, for example.
Yeah.
And I watch them very, very closely. I'm the one that people, when I talk about how I test and how I get feedback, people are like, oh, well, that's just completely unfeasible. And I'm like, yes, that's what I want. I want to hear people's tiny sighs of disappointment.
Yeah.
They won't remember it afterward when you ask them about it, right? When you ask them like, oh, do you remember when you sighed in disappointment? And they're like, no, I can't remember that one thing, because then they got distracted by something else and was throwing something and put their face in a wall or whatever it was that they were doing. But I have to look for that, and I have to, because that's where the world breaks, right? And that's where I haven't thought about everything that every human might possibly do.
Yeah. We have a unique skill set to design the next way that people see reality, where we can decide what physics is like and what time is like and what presence means. And that's a huge amount of power. Like, you just have a lot more power in that situation than you realize. And it doesn't sound like genius, the stuff we're talking about, but it was really, really good to sit down and just to really hammer on, like, what does it really mean to build accessible content? What does it really mean to think about, you know, this becoming the way people live?
And I think that's a great segue into our next section, which is a big part of the problem sets that we identified is both the lack of more diverse creators and also more diverse content, which gets back to this issue of there's so many ways to make tea, which is that if you're making an experience that is about making tea and everyone on your team makes tea the same way, your experience is broken.
Yeah.
And I think that that was a big point of the discussion for us, was really talking about the value of diverse teams because of this need for a variety of perspectives. And that conversation went a lot of different ways. So we can kind of jump in.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think that this community, I've been making games for 20 plus years, and I've seen this community, in particular GDC, like I first came to GDC in 1999. So I've seen this community completely transform in the last 10 years, you know. But I mean, it's just been, it's an asymptotic curve, right? Like, the more difference you get, the more difference you support, the more difference you see, the more it becomes comfortable. And pretty soon, like, this room is incredibly diverse compared to what like an experimental gameplay workshop room would look like in 1999, you know, or 2001. So like, there is already, we have a leg up in this case, that we already have more female creators, we have more creators of color, we have more international creators in this community than any other community that has made games before and has made interactive content before. Like, now it's better than it ever has been. And that is a huge benefit. And because I think we're used to not necessarily being represented, we're much more open and sharing. So I think this community already has a leg up in that space. But this idea that content can be made by anyone is also possible now. The ecosystem has changed so dramatically for tools and sort of pipelines that it's a completely different realm. If you looked at the International Women's Day page, you know, Oculus had 5 games by female CEOs and 5 games by female leads. That's 10 games showcased on International Women's Day. Like, that wasn't an accident. That happened because Facebook Oculus has consistently worked to promote and support and pay for the work of women in VR. And like, that storefront is a testament to the fact that they made that a priority in their funding structures. And that's the kind of stuff that I think we started talking about, is like, okay, how are we, you know, we're all kind of at the cusp of being, you know, connected, and we're relatively around the same age, but there's an entire group of people coming up behind us. How do we make sure that they get connected and get access?
Yeah. And just coming from the opposite side of things, in like the enterprise world, they are not gamers, so they all look exactly the same. They're all back-end developers, some are front-end developers. Like, even at Microsoft, it was funny to see, like, oh, there's so many more like people with tattoos and colored hair everywhere and piercings everywhere. When I first started as an evangelist, it was funny because like we were all like, okay, no, can't dye our hair, can't. And then Satya got hired, and we were like, cool, we're all dyeing our hair purple. And we went to a hackathon, and the students came up and they were like, oh, can you tell us who the Microsoft people are? And the person was like, oh, anyone with purple hair and piercings, go find them. They know all about Azure cloud development and gaming as well. Yeah. And it was just like, what? What? And it's very interesting because now you see all of these enterprise companies have to change because this is not their world. And it is very difficult for very old systems to incorporate new cultures, new ideas of, oh, you need a game designer. Like you have to have someone who can actually figure out the problems of interaction and figure out how this enterprise application is going to be interesting and fun and useful for people.
Yeah.
And so again, the problem is, well, then these enterprise people don't know who to hire because they're like, I don't know who is a game. Exactly. And so then they start coming to GDC and interacting, and it starts to evolve and change, but it's slow and hard. And so it's like very encouraging when you see all these big companies like, oh, okay, I have to hire like a game studio. That makes sense to make my corporate internal training application because now it is a game. Like now it is a game. It can have a 2D component. It can have a virtual component, AR component. And it's like, cool. We're gonna start doing this.
It's
now.
an actual hire. It's not diversity salad. Like I've said this before publicly, and I'll say it again. Like I have eaten a whole fuckload of diversity salad. You know, like let's get together and have a salad and talk about women in gaming. Like let's not.
Yep.
Like shmoney. You know what I mean? Like I don't really need any more salad, but my studio needs to be funded, and people that work for me need jobs. And like if you're in the position to fund in VR, fund diverse people. Just do it, right? And fund content that isn't all the same stuff that people think will work, that kind of doesn't scale and doesn't engage a broad. I mean, like, how many people were just like, whoa, tilt brush. What an idea. Being creative in a virtual space with glowy stuff. Who knew? You know what I mean? It's like that's just
Tilt brush is the best though.
This is what I'm saying. Like a lot of people were like, "Wow, I had no idea that virtual painting would be a thing."
Yeah, and that was
that's amazing to me. Like, how could you possibly not? Right? But this is the thing. If you're in the space and you're doing this stuff, like you make a concrete difference by being available to design, but you also make a difference by being the one that puts the money on the table for that diverse creator.
Yeah, and that was a big part of our conversation, and a takeaway for a lot of us was a commitment from everyone in our group to help move that bar as far as we're able to within our own companies and institutions, and taking the responsibility of being advocates for just better content made by more different kinds of people.
Yeah, we all sort of said, could we each, like this year, could we each try to focus on at least one person who's coming up in the industry that needs a mentor, that we can connect either with funding or some kind of a partnership that we think could do good work in this space, right? And if we all just committed to just helping one person, and then that person, as a result, was successful, and then they could commit to helping one person, that would grow, you know, it's basically the rising tide that floats all boats.
Yeah.
Right, and we think about this sort of stuff a lot. The VR community, especially like in the very early days, was very, very communicative and very like supportive of each other. We all talked to each other. We're all on the same like Slack channels and Skype channels and talking constantly and sharing information and constantly talking. But it is that sort of thing where we're trying to sort of reproduce that culture, and you have to think about the culture we're reproducing. I am planting a flag here for like weird, interesting, awesome content that is not content that I would make and not content that I would see. And I'm like highly, highly committed to that. And the way we do that is sort of building this community of VR developers and say, well, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to support each other, and we're going to lift each other up. And you do that by acting out yourself, right? The change you want to see in the world, being aware of the culture you want to reproduce, and like putting that out.
And if you don't know how to do that, if you are like, I would like to help do that, I would like to mentor some or fund someone. If you're like, I don't know how to get started, you just ask us and we will tell you.
There are microphones.
So, and part of it, this is an invitation, I think, to the whole community to really think about, building the future of what it means to be a person and exist in digital space and physical space. And that is an incredible responsibility. And if you don't like feel a little bit of that, you gotta like open your eyes a little wider, because it's happening, and we're building something really insane right now. So
Yeah, I mean, people will look back and remember this time, and some of the paradigms like the pinch are going to be invented in the next few years. Like you could be the person that invents that. You could literally save the wrist muscles and hand trauma of thousands of people an hour, right? Like by inventing stuff that's more actually physically feasible for everyone, you could actually be making a huge impact. When I first started working in games, I left a PhD to work on The Sims. So I got recruited out of grad school because I didn't want to make drones, and I wanted to work on games instead. So I was working on The Sims, and there was an editor for The Sims called Edith, and we called it the Crippler. Because it was like, it had a bunch of clicky interface stuff in it and like little sliders. And I developed severe carpal tunnel within 6 months of working on it. And had to get like the ergo lady to come to my desk. I mean, it was like a physically painful thing to use this editor. And it was just because some people just designed it thinking like, you just need some sliders and some checkboxes, right?
Yep.
Like we're way beyond that now, but what we're talking about now is programming the whole body, right? And so when you have a body that's different, or you sit differently in your living room, you're bringing that aspect into this design conversation. That is diversity in action. And it's really important.
And I think about this a lot because, and I hope this isn't an unpopular opinion at the Game Developers Conference, but when we bring these concepts from games into VR, right? Like we have these paradigms that we sort of have expectations for, and we bring them from games. You know, a lot of the clicking, you know, a lot of the button mashing and the abstractions, right, between yourself and how to interact with this virtual world. It's kind of doing a bit of a disservice to VR. It is a beautiful, wonderful technology of its own, and so what we need right now is so much experimentation and then so much sharing. So like things like this are so important, especially for VR, just in terms of trying new things and then talking about it, or yelling on Twitter. I mean, Twitter's another amazing forum for screaming about the things that you experiment. But it is this, like we won't find any of these new, what's the new pinch in VR, for example. I'm still with the edible menu system, by the way, like picking up menu items and eating them.
Quit the game with the burrito.
I think that's going somewhere. I feel deeply about it.
Well, what I love about you specifically, I just fangirl over Sai all the time, is that you talk about all the random shit you try and that failed and why.
But with love.
But with love.
But with love.
Because it's interesting because, again, you were saying literally outside, like, we're all smart and we might actually be doing the exact same problem, like running into the exact same design issues that someone else already ran into and already proved out and spent hours and time and money and resources that they already knew. They just didn't share their failures. They shared what they did right. And so you have all these people redoing experiments that it's like, no, we already did those experiments. Try it with like a different graphics card, try it with a different headset, like change it slightly, but because we aren't talking, it gets rehashed and rehashed and rehashed. And it's like, okay, we've solidified this, it's good. Let's maybe try something new and why, or change the experiment.
We're all very smart. I will make the exact same mistake that you made. Like it's not like, oh no, I was dumb, I made this dumb mistake. No, I will make the exact same mistake. So I love things like failure workshops or talking about like, here is a garbage thing that I made, and like putting it out and talking about it and why it failed and why it didn't feel, oh my God, if you could actually, I've thought about like compiling like experiments of like just things that feel terrible, but like everyone else would do it. Like, you know, content warning, bad, right? But like, and then putting that out and like, here, let's experience these bad things and we can talk about why it doesn't work. And that's okay.
Also,
it's okay. We've learned.
Yeah. So what it was interesting is I also went to, I forget, this was probably like a year ago. And for this developer created Locomotion, and they were experimenting, and they were like, oh yeah, if you move your arms, you're just gonna like parallax slide everywhere. And it's because all of the games that they had played used really good teleportation and really good locomotion that they were like, oh, well, we want to try something different. And it's like, oh, honey, that has been tried. It's just the games that you have played that are popular don't use it. Exactly. Yeah. And it's like, again, we need to have more of that celebrating, like, hey, remember when we all used to puke because of this thing? Because new people that are coming into this new industry don't have that background yet.
Oh my gosh.
Speaking of,
What
Hey,
a
look,
great segue.
The next generation.
It's like we talked about this before.
Yeah, but you have an eye on it.
But no,
I'm
I
just
think
going.
what you're bringing up is really important. And you know what Robin and I both do at the university level is trying to think through a lot of these things and think through how can you solidify things that aren't solidified, and how can you teach students how to do things in a way that's meaningful and applicable.
yeah. Teach them how to take risks. I mean, I think one of the things that's terrible about being like a VR developer or an AR developer or a mixed reality developer right now is that there's not a lot of money to be made. Like, it's not a huge industry right now. You're not like the number of sort of huge hits, like Grand Theft Auto style installs, that you're going to get, like, it's virtually zero. So like, you don't have to be in this industry pretending that you're the one that's going to make all the money because suddenly you're going to discover something that blows it out of the water. The install bases are what they are, right? So that takes one of the layers of like faking it till you make it out. And then you can just really be faking it and be like, well, maybe it'd be cool to like slice through music. I don't know. I'll give it a shot, And I tell this to my students all the time, like, you're definitely not going to make any money with what you make unless it's it'll be a black swan, as they say, if you do. So, hey, do the thing that feels exceptionally interesting and strange to work on that you wouldn't ever be able to do if you worked at a company and had to pay people.
And now's
like,
the time.
Just do it. You got 3-4 years where you could do anything you want. You could smoke a lot of weed and watch Game of Thrones, or you could make Beat Saber. You choose.
Yeah.
Maybe you could do both.
Yeah, I was like, ¿por qué no los dos? Yeah.
Yeah, I remember being at a fireside chat that you did at Oculus Connect this year, and I remember a student came up and asked like this exact question. They were like, "I'm working on this game. How do I make money?" And you were just like, "You don't try to make money. You're a student. Do something that you're really passionate about, and if you're really passionate about it, that will." Something cool might come out of it.
Well,
It
and
also
if you have
probably
the
won't,
privilege
but-
to be a student in one of these programs, which is
God,
like,
yes.
it's a huge amount of privilege. Like, you're already in a situation where you're developing skills, you're creating relationships, you're experimenting, you're learning your own throughput. Like, that in and of itself is such a privilege, right? Like, I listened to recently On Being, which is one of my favorite podcasts. Listened to the interview with Teju Cole, who's like a fantastic photographer and poet. And he said something really interesting to me, which I think is relevant. He said that if you're a person living today and you're like awake, you're experiencing kind of a level of constant rage just by how shitty everything is. And like, the reason that Teju does the work that he does is because he can. It's because he has the privilege to have hope, was the way that he put it. And I thought that was amazing. Like, the privilege to have hope. This room is filled with people with the privilege to imagine a hopeful future for VR, to imagine an accessible future, and to educate the next generation with that capability, which is like, that's pretty awesome, So it's not like you're just saying, here's the VR, learn how to do it. I think what our programs try to do is, hey, wouldn't it be cool if you were an ethical, integrated, intersectional creator who was thinking about this as a human problem, right? Which is, I guess it's a little woo, but whatever.
No, that's fine. I do sort of the similar thing, but with jokes and shit posting. So I do, it's true. I do a panel at PAX, which is sort of like another way of doing it. It's called You VR or VR't, which is
It's great.
It's a this thing that Andy Moore was caught saying in a roundtable interview for Steam. But anyway, I took that. And basically the whole idea is like pitch the worst VR ideas to each other. And it sounds really shitposty and awful, but it's actually supposedly it's basically we all pitch our worst ideas to each other and then we riff on it until they're truly garbage. And then what we start doing is we invite the audience, and I always do these at consumer shows. It's usually PAX, and they come up and they give us their terrible VR ideas, and then we riff on it with them. What this does is kind of in this weird sort of subversive way. It's like trying to onboard people into like VR ideas and welcoming them into the joke and welcoming them into have this conversation with us about like what works and what doesn't. Early VR, I'm sure we all heard this. What I really want, can I use a different one? No, I can't. What I really want is Skyrim in VR.
Yeah.
And I tried to tell them, I don't think you want that. I think you want something, and I know you're looking for like a large, more immersive world, but what you're looking for is not necessarily this. Skyrim's very empty. It's made for games, right? It's made for games. It's long walking distance. Like there's a lot of stuff to change here. And then you get into the like, you don't know what I want. You can't tell me what I want. You know, and then it's like, because that's you talking down to people in some ways, but like trying to bring them in and educating them and bringing people into this thought process about VR, and then they can riff on it. And it's always a ton of fun. And by the end, they have sort of a greater understanding about VR and what works. And but it's not just,
it's
not
cheap
just
to
us,
get
it's
started.
everybody.
You can just get some assets and put them in a room and then put the headset on and walk around in it, and like then you're in VR. Like Everybody's Sad is a game that came out of my program, and it's a game where you walk around a room and all the objects in it are sad. Like you,
That's really
you, like
great.
you open a drawer and there's like a sad toothbrush. You know, it's just like bummed out. You know, and you're like, you know, just like it's about being sad, right? But like it's funny. You know, it's just interesting. And when they were like, we're going to make a game of virtual objects that are all really depressed, I was like, sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Do it. Give it a shot.
The other thing that I'll say about this, about education specifically, and this is something we talked about a lot at the convening, is and for us working at the university level, is that education related to immersive technology or even just computer programming, game engines, 3D is something that almost no one gets to touch until they arrive at a university, unless you're in a very, very privileged community that has dedicated government funding to buy computers. There's a public high school in my region that has a Unity lab.
Wow.
That's amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's like the best place I've ever been. I was
Because
like, I
you're
want
giving
to
them
come here.
the tools early so they know that that's a tool that they can use.
Yeah,
But
it's
the-
aspirational.
It's
yeah.
aspirational, absolutely.
But those are really rare. Those are really rare moments. But I think, and this kind of hits on all of this, is there are opportunities for all of us to be involved in those processes. So I go twice a year to that high school and review student projects, mentor a student, give a talk. And that is not something that is recorded or publicized. It's not, I mean, I'm talking about it right now, but it's not like a glamorous thing. It's not, I'm on the stage at VRDC at GDC. It's like,
you
no,
can do it.
I'm at a high school in the suburbs talking to a bunch of really weird kids.
I've done it.
Yeah.
I've done it for like small like day camps and stuff, like
Same.
for various populations.
Girl Scouts. It was great. I
Girl
was
Scouts
just
is
like,
a good one.
I can't wait to talk about game development for Girl Scouts.
This-
So
Cute
There's a
sisters.
program Latinitas.
Big
and,
brothers.
This panel is mostly a list of things that we're doing that we're like, don't you want to do these things too? But I mean, seriously,
Isn't it cool?
I can guarantee that in most of the areas where you live, there is a high school program that would really love to hear from you as someone doing this work, and that's where really meaningful change happens at a systematic, large-scale level with a lot of people involved in very small places.
Yep.
Yeah, it's funny because you can use technology to fix lots of problems. I have a friend whose child had really intense early onset diabetes, and they developed a bunch of technologies that work with the Apple Watch so they can monitor their child's blood sugar level at all times. And that's created a community of people that are working, at being parents and having lives around children that are really at risk. Like those kinds of ideas happen when you're faced with a challenge in your life and then you engage. And if you have the idea that you can just hack something and fix a problem, you can make a huge impact on the world, right? And this is a place now where you can get a store asset for free. You can put it in a world and put the headset on and see it. As long as you have access, it's that simple in some ways. There are really easy ways to do this. And it's just as simple as reaching out to a high school locally and saying can I bring my PSVR by and show them Beat Saber, or show them this Unity thing that I made? It's not that hard to do, and they will love you. You will change their lives.
Yeah,
literally.
Oh yeah.
introducing them also to GitHub and being like, oh, by the way, this is literally repository upon repository upon repository of free code, and with some of them nice documentation, usually not. Please write better documentation, please. I'm begging everyone in this room. I'm like, hey, Addison, remember when I used to tell everyone to write documentation? back at Microsoft because I was like, it was insane. I was just like, we should be writing documentation all the time and sharing it with each other internally as well as externally. But it's very fun because I'm like, I'll go on GitHub and be like, oh, this is great. How do I use it? Nothing.
No information.
So it's like cool. But the great thing about GitHub too is that you can say, oh, I figured out how to use this thing that had no documentation. Do a pull request that is just documentation to that thing and be like, hey, dude, I wrote up how to do this with a cool example. Please integrate. Thanks. But like that will help kids be like, oh, it's free. I can just drag this into Unity. The free assets, like the asset store, great resource. Just like going online and being like royalty-free asset.
The other
in-game.
education thing is when you do demo in locations that are they're not normally going to see these things, you know, like take it to a party, a birthday party, whatever, like give normal people, muggles, you know, access to this technology because you have it. If you have it at home, like how many of you have a VR headset at home that you could take somewhere else? Yeah, see, that's a lot of you already, right? I know that's not everybody, but it's still a lot.
How many of you have grandparents that live in retirement communities?
Ooh.
It's like a handful of people, right? There are so many places where if you took some really cool, new, exciting technology and showed it to people who've never seen it before. When I had my grandfather, who at the time was 94, try tilt brush, it was like the first time in my life that I've seen him like completely just there was like no stone. It was just, he was just like a little boy drawing in light. So.
That is worth everything. Like if you don't want to do it for the good, just do it to like see the like bright eyes on people's faces and the screaming, like the wonder and the joy and the delight. Like, oh my gosh, I vicariously lived through every single person who I put in VR for the first time. I'm like, I remember this moment. I remember that. I remember having that moment. I've had so many people that I put in demo. I love demoing because they come out and they just look at me, especially first time users. They're like, did you see what I was doing? And I go, yes, I saw what you were doing. And then they were like, it was like real. Like it's not real, but it was real. But it felt real. And I'm like, let's sit down. Here's a couch. Let's sit down. Let's talk about this. Let's unpack. It's really magical. And like every time you get the opportunity to do that, like that's just a personal, like just hobby. It's a good hobby. Feels good.
We could rant all day.
Isn't VR great?
Yeah, so we're gonna stop there and leave some time for questions. If you have a question, you can come up to the
mic.
up to the microphone, and we'll stick around and do that for a little bit. And make sure to get your zine on the way out. There's some red-shirted people with zines for you. So
Go ahead.
Hi.
Hi, humans.
My name is Katie. I lead the alt space team. So I'm wondering, what would you give advice to for people working on social communities? You talked a lot about how people interact in a VR environment, but what about when you interact with people?
yeah. So the question is, what advice do we have for interacting in social spaces
Yes.
in VR?
Yes.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about the fact that having standards across all these platforms would really help, and specifically like being able to sort of enforce boundaries. A lot of what I think about in VR spaces and this kind of social engagement, also because I work on a social game, is the fact that you really want to be able to sort of say yes or no to someone. You want to be able to say like, I appear to you this way, and you want that to be safe. And I think Timony was really great at representing this stuff. I think a lot of the work that she's been doing at Unity is related to this notion that you should have ownership over your data and your profile, and you should be able to control how it's used by different applications. And just the basics of setting boundaries and sharing space is something that a lot of people are going to need to do a lot of work on until we come up with the right solution. Yeah. So that's like, square one, just like it's really important to be able to feel safe in that space.
Yeah, I'll just say really quickly, I think the biggest thing for me with most social VR is that it's a really difficult space to curate and to moderate. And as the user base has grown in the last couple of years, especially with PSVR and more affordable Windows headsets that get a lot of like young boys running wild in social VR, and it's a pretty scary place. Like I get terrified of there's just like a group of 13-year-old boys just like chasing me around, and I'm just like I'm done. I'm done.
Where did all these Winnie the Poohs come from?
Also, real quick, South by Southwest, I also had a talk with a bunch of people, and one of them was from High Fidelity, Liv Erickson. She's great, working at Mozilla now, but she was like, consent based tools. Like bake it into any interaction with multiplayer. If you bake it into the beginning tool set of what you're creating, then it's not like we have all of these issues and we don't have a system to easily integrate or modify or build upon in the future. It's like if you have the system in the gameplay system already embedded into whatever else you're doing, it's so easy then to be like, oh, we have a mute button. Oh, we have a bubble button. Oh, now we have like block. Oh, you can use this hand gesture. So like build the tool set and then share it with people.
Share. Yeah, Rob Coster gave a really good talk last year about all these issues as well, looking back at MMOs and early social design in MMOs and how it's all really relevant now. It's a great talk.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll take one from over here.
Hello, I show what buildings look like before they get built using VR.
Yay!
Heck yeah. Heck yes.
Very
So
cool.
I get to do a lot of demos, and I also get to a lot of watch of VR noobs like try VR for the first time. I know. So it's like really awesome. But also, I found that de-gamifying things has been a big challenge, and also coming at it from that game designer perspective. So I wanted to see what your thoughts are on like sort of where you think the industry is moving towards for like the best experiences for people both that can walk around a room and that are paralyzed. So what do you think is the best like technologies coming up, and how would you design using them?
I'm really excited about the Quest because it has no cables, and on the projects that we work on with Oculus, both for the Quest and also for the Rift, we spent a lot of time thinking about seated versus standing and one-handed and all that stuff. I'll be honest with you, a lot of people are leaning into the same stuff. Like a lot of people are leaning into the sort of the super hot style experience, which is, or Beat Saber, which are high action and high aggression as a result. Like the very first time I showed Luna to a woman over 50, she was awesome. She played the game for like 2 hours straight, basically, and at a frame rate that was not great. And I was like, what's your thing? She's like, well, VR. And then she stopped and she said, actually, I can't say that. She said, I've only had one other VR experience, so I shouldn't characterize all VR by it. I said, which one was it? And she was like, the one where the music attacks your face.
Oh wow.
And I was like, oh yeah, that one's really popular. So I think that chill experiences, like Bree and myself, I think there are several lady designers that are interested in tend and befriend games and like collection and growing stuff and like chilling out. Luna's a chill game. Like there are people that are working in that space, but I wish there were more of you, to be totally honest.
Yeah. The thing, so you said how to de-gamify it, and I just want to be very clear about one thing in particular is that like actually game developers are really great for VR because we look at interactions a lot and VR is all interactions. So that's why we're kind of really good at this whole thing, and like why we're going into VR and why we're so good is because we think about how people interact with a technology. Now that said, I'm like also very, very excited about Quest, but I also wanted to mention I was on a panel at OC5 this year with Josh Straub with the Dagger system, who does a lot of accessibility, and he actually has one really valid point, which is that the controller systems that we've been using and like the touch controls and things, they make your hand conform to these controllers. So while the Quest is fantastic in terms of the lack of wires, and we can do a lot of things in terms of content, we do need hardware developers to also pay attention to people of various ways of interacting physically with these controllers and systems. And the more we focus on like games and high action and the hardware developers are building controllers and hardware for that, like it does come with its own backdrop.
Yeah, even just the very first Oculus, like if you had black hair, you just couldn't get the thing on your head.
Oh yeah.
Like I had 2 developers on my team that would like have to like do all the stuff just to get the thing big enough, to go over their hair. And it's like stuff like that, like we have problems on a fundamental level with some of the hardware.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and just a quick note too, and there's been a little bit of talk about this at VRDC in general, but as legislation starts to change, like it has for the web, where if you run a certain type of organization, you have accessibility standards that you must meet. You are obligated to do that by the government, or you can be sued. And I think as VR moves more towards a mass adopted public scale application,
true.
I think we'll see standards, at least for certain kinds of applications, become stricter.
I actually like looking at a lot of the ADA compliance stuff for like buildings and things, just to sort of like give me an idea of like how I'm making a space and what so much research has gone into space design for people of like various abilities, and I can learn from that. I don't have to do all my own new research. Like there's a lot of research, but it's like especially in VR for ages.
Yeah, architecture has been around for thousands of years, you guys. We need to hire more architects into this space because they literally thousands of years of learnings and designs of how to make spaces for people to work together, to be in spaces, to look beautiful.
All right.
Kat mentioned that there were some ideas that, my cat,
Hi.
that there were some ideas or some problems that we shouldn't be solving right now and that we should be prioritizing other things. I was curious if each of you have different perspectives on, what are those visible problems that aren't important to be addressing and where should we be shifting our focus to address the things that are urgent?
I have a somewhat unpopular opinion.
Do
I'm
it.
totally happy. A lot of people are talking to and ask me, they're like, oh, we have to put in best practices. And they're trying to do that now. And so we're talking about like the pinch thing, like the pinch gesture. And yes, we want to get that, but to try and put together best practices right now is a mistake. We are not done experimenting. And especially when we're talking about all of these new people coming in behind us, if we put out best practices docs, this is how you teleport. And they're like, okay, that is the way you tell. And then it does become not the best practice, but the only practice. People stop experimenting and looking. So I'm very much like, not best practices.
I think for me, I was in a panel yesterday, maybe, and this is just me. I'll disagree with somebody at GDC. That's cool. But the idea that we need AAA content to move towards mass adoption and AAA games, I'm just like, it's just not, in my opinion, that those are not the killer apps of immersive technology. The killer applications are social, they're creative, and they're weird. Because being a human is really weird, and this is a really human technology. Traditional gaming is not a human technology. It is a sedentary, isolated endeavor where you control things like this. That's not like what it means to be out and engaged. I mean, I play a lot of games, so don't take that. But I think this idea that we need AAA games to make VR work, I'm just like, I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the adoption profile of something like a phone, like what was it that made people want to buy an iPhone, right? It was that you could have a better MP3 player, kind of, right? Like the thing that I always talk about is like, I would really love it if I had a pair of glasses that showed me where to go. Like, I just don't know where I'm going all the time. Like just this week, I mean, I'm sure you can all imagine what my calendar looks like. It's like, just even figuring out where my next meeting is from here is going to be a pain in my ass, right? Like if I could just pop on a pair of glasses and it told me where to walk, I would do it. I'm not saying that the technology doesn't have its problems and that there aren't massive volumes of science fiction written about the world that becomes, but we better solve it rather than just letting Apple implement it. You know what I'm saying? Like this is one of the things that will happen is that if we don't have active conversations about non-best practices and all the stuff we're talking about, is one company will just sit on the one thing and then suddenly we'll all have iTunes.
And
in your face, you know? And like, I'm not that's totally a diss on iTunes, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like some little cabal of designers should not be designing the future of the world, right? And so I think that like, the things that you don't want to engage in are like, this is going to blow up the market or this is going to blow up the market. What you really want to be doing is thinking about whatever you're building, whatever weird thing that is, what are the 2 or 3 things in it that make it interesting and easy to use? Because that's going to revolutionize the way things go. So it's not like areas so much as your focus should be really, really about making the best thing you can make right now.
Yeah, one of the problems specifically is like people are like what Robin said earlier, I want to make money. It's like that's not a problem you should be solving right now. We have other problems, like making money is dependent on like us getting a foundation, us eventually figuring out how to build worlds well in a social way.
It's a loss-leading industry for a while.
Yeah, so it's like that other problem of, oh, now that we have all that, what is the killer app? How do we make money? Okay, that comes after. But it's also like, okay, not how do we make money, but then how do we fund other people? Yeah. Like, so shifting from this question to that question.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we're going to have to cut questions there.
No, it's just sad.
It's like, oh.
It's just sad.
But we'll stick around for a couple of minutes. Make sure you get a zine on your way out. And thanks, everybody,
thanks for
coming
coming
so much. Have a great GDC.